Hey, my name is Patrick Curtis, CEO and founder of Wall Street Oasis. We got another great story today from one of our WSO Academy students. Olivia kind of came into the program right before her sophomore year. She ended up using the Academy for a lot of the networking, a lot of the mentor help, but listen to what she specifically says about the networking, the accelerated recruiting timelines, and more specifically, what she wishes she changed slightly in terms of the mock interviews. Enjoy. Olivia, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
So I'd love it if you could just give the listeners a short summary of your bio, just give them a little bit of background in terms of where you go to school, stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm originally from Fort Worth, Texas, and I'm currently a junior at Washington and Lee University, which is a small liberal arts school in Lexington, Virginia. I'm studying business administration and art history. This past year had gone through the investment banking recruiting process and am planning to intern at Houlihan Lokey in the New York office this coming summer.
Congratulations.
Thank
So
you.
I'd love for people, I think we have a lot of success stories around like people coming from non-targets, but I'd love to hear just your path in particular. Was it freshman year, high school? When did you first figure out like I wanted, finance was interesting to me? And then more specifically, was your interest more just finance or like when did you figure out, hey, investment banking is the direction I wanted to go in?
Yeah, so kind of interestingly enough, it really wasn't until the summer going into my first year in college that I knew I wanted to pursue something kind of business finance oriented. I
Mhm.
had always kind of had a more design interest and inclination as far as internships throughout high school, but at the same time, always was curious about the financial and kind of business side of that. So this summer, going into my first year, did an art business program at Sotheby's, and kind of through that was able to really bridge the gap between that design and also kind of the technical side of things. And I think that exposure to valuation and market dynamics kind of initially really ignited that kind of financial spark, I guess, as far as what I wanted to pursue. And so while WNL is a liberal arts school, so there's really no immediate pressure to kind of decide what it is you want to do. I think that was really helpful and kind of my course selection and everything. So loved my initial kind of accounting and finance courses and joined the real estate society. So was able to kind of see valuation through a different lens and a more kind of broader scope. And I think all of that really cemented by the end of my freshman year that I wanted to pursue investment banking.
Yeah, and so was it something where like there was a club or someone in your, in one of the clubs told you, hey, you should go for investment banking? Or because, I think Washington Lee, for people who aren't as familiar, it does have some alumni. It's not as if it's completely a non-target.
Mm-hmm.
I'd call it, maybe the semi-target is a decent, similar to Williams where I went, like, I don't think it's a
Right.
complete non-target. So I'd love to hear kind of, was somebody like, hey, investment banking's for you, or is it, a club that told you?
Yeah, so I think at WNL, while it is a liberal arts school, I would say a large portion of the student body does pursue finance, accounting, business. And so kind of from that pool, it becomes even that pursues investment banking. And that's historically been the case. So there's a lot of alumni kind of in that area and space that are coming to campus. We have a number of info sessions, and that being said, within the real estate society, had a number that had done investment banking internships, and firms come and talk to us. And so I think kind of through that, and then the soft kind of networking that followed that, just me reaching out to people and talking to people who had either considered pursuing that path or had done so, really kind of confirmed that for me that was what I wanted to pursue. And I would say through the recruiting process with WNL being kind of that semi-target, it seems a lot of it is very much alumni driven. With they really do make effort coming to campus and are always happy to talk to you and kind of give you advice. And so that was definitely helpful throughout the process.
That's great. Yeah. So I guess you joined the academy back in August, leading into your sophomore year. So I'd call that on time. Basically, not too
Hmm.
early, not too late, because it gives you it still gives you plenty of months, the 3 full months to work with us to kind of get yourself ready before on-cycle recruiting. But I'd love to hear
Right.
why or how you came across, WSO in general or WSO Academy, and then specifically like what made you kind of want to join.
Yeah, so I really felt like having said, by the end of my freshman year, knowing that was kind of what I wanted to do and definitely by the end of that summer. But even so, had talked to others who were older than me, had gone through that process and felt like I was super early in that. But was also at the same time told that, it being early and ahead of things can't hurt you.
Mhm.
So started to kind of explore the different prep programs, because I just wanted to kind of augment the help that I'd be getting at school with the career center and that kind of thing, and really kind of have a good idea of what to expect before being thrown into the recruiting process.
Mhm.
And so started exploring the programs and found, Wall Street Oasis to really be kind of the top of my list just because of the all the positive testimonials and the strong kind of roster of mentors and all of the help and steps and resources that that program would, you know, equip me with. And so was lucky enough to apply and kind of be able to be a part of that program.
And so when you kind of first came in and started working with us, obviously you do the resume review, LinkedIn profile audit. It's kind of
Mhm.
August. We're now rolling into, say, September when you're starting school. Did you feel like there was like an immediate need to start networking? It sounds like you already kind of were talking with alumni. Did you scale that up with us kind of in October? Because timing is like a big issue. So a lot of people,
Yeah.
we're in October right now. A lot of people are kind of, they'll be listening to this and they're thinking, am I too late? Am I early? And there's even some threads in the forums talking about like, stop reaching out to us if you're a freshman, or stop reaching out to us in the.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about like when you started ramping that, and then I'd love to hear just like numbers in terms of like, did you talk with 10 people, 20, 50? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so I think definitely it's a gray area and it's hard because if you want to do this, you really want to be ahead because it's, competitive. And you also want to respect who you're networking with and am I way too early or way too late? And I think kind of that's something that WSO helped with as far as like getting a reality check in that you're not too early and this is what you need to be doing and at least get your contacts together and just start those kind of initial interactions and whether that's one call and you say I'd love to reconnect with you back in a couple months if they say it's too early. But I definitely think that it's never hurts to be too early because I think the process seems to be accelerating more and more each year. And so you'll see threads like that, and maybe your peers will tell you that. But I mean, the more people you talk to, it only kind of helps get to know what, the business and the industry or the firm and kind of affirm whether or not that's something you want to pursue. So I think it definitely does not hurt. And I think, obviously be respectful of their time, but you're never really too early to kind of
Yeah,
put your name out there and
I
stuff.
agree. I agree wholeheartedly. In fact, I would say that, if you're looking at networking as a pure transaction of like, is this call going to lead directly to an interview? Then yes, yes, there's certain times that's too early, but if you're looking at networking
Mhm.
as a process to build knowledge around the different firms, to build knowledge about the different groups and dynamics and understanding, and then having those initial touch points, like you mentioned, so that when recruiting does kick off, it's easier to get on a second call, or at least drop an email so you can have a referral. If you're looking at it that
Mhm.
way, I think it's never too early, even for freshmen. Now, of course, you don't want to be as a freshman reaching out like in the middle of on-cycle recruiting for everybody because
Mhm.
are you talking to me? But over the summer, or when it's a little bit quieter, say March through October, is I think a great time
Mhm.
for first years to even reach out and start building that network, because you can be like, oh, I know I'm super early. I'm not, I'm really just trying to learn. And I feel like that comes,
Right.
those calls are sometimes more productive because there isn't that pressure or like that sense of
Hmm.
like you're trying to get something from me right now. It's just pure like a conversation and getting to know them. Uh,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. So okay, so you started with us, you kind of talked to me about the numbers. Like, was it like you talked to 10 alum, 20 alum? Was it all alum that you focused on, or did you kind of reach outside of that group?
So I think kind of between, you know, connections I had from home, and then WNL, that's where I really started.
Mhm.
And who, my peers in the grade above who had gone through the process, who they had recommended reaching out to. That's really where I started. So I would say that probably, September through, kind of October and maybe be a couple of calls a week.
Yep.
And then kind of November, December, maybe 3 to 4. And then it got to probably in January, February, I would be on calls in between. Like if I was not in class, I was on a call, so it really ramped up. And I think I'm not, I think that's probably able to be avoided if you kind of better balance it. But I think instead of doing that slower, gradual progression, I think it caught me by surprise how accelerated the process kind of came to me.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
so,
four firms opened up in December and then like a rush
right.
in January, and everyone was like, what? Why is it so early?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be February, March. Like, nope, just kidding.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it sounds like though you were able to ramp it and you were able to get on, it sounds like 50-ish calls, I'm guessing, or if not more, like 70. And
Yes.
that tends to be a pattern of people who end up having success is like usually we're seeing at least 50, sometimes 80. I
Mhm.
know we had a freshman who's done like 120, but she's an extreme case. But point is there's, you don't have to do 100, 200 calls, but if you've done like 50 to 70, you have a couple touch points at each of the banks. I feel like it's really helpful as you get further along. So
Yeah.
tell me about like just like on campus recruiting versus like how did you get into these processes? Like, so did you apply to like 20 firms? And then I'd love to hear like what was that conversion looking like to like first round, like in-person first rounds, or like was it all higher views and half you were cut by half of them? How did that work?
Yeah. So it was a
And it can
lot.
be rough numbers. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm just trying to get a sense of like I think people like seeing that like, hey, what does it take? And I like showing them like,
Yeah.
this many calls, this many applications, that type of thing.
Yeah. So definitely it begins kind of, as you said, with the calls and kind of that 50 to 70 range. And I think for me, it was really kind of, I knew what I was looking for in a firm. And I think that the program also helped guide me to that. And that's what those networking calls as well, and kind of what culture you're looking for, what you want to get out of it. And so kind of going into it, I was kind of struggling between not casting, too broad of a net where I was just like putting all of my time and energy scattered everywhere and kind of tried to concentrate it into a few firms. And so, yes, that kind of, whether it was an on campus coffee chat or, virtually, it was kind of blended between my interviews and networking sessions almost, or meetings, more formally through Zoom. But it was kind of begun almost casually and then would kind of ramp up to the final round.
Got it. And then in terms of just your work inside the academy, I assume a lot of it, the one-on-one time with the mentors was kind of crafting your story, making sure your why, your teammate was locked in, your stories
Mhm.
were polished. But then did you do a lot of mock interviews with us? I'd be curious to hear. Did you leverage that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I did not do that until the very end, which is something that I definitely wish I had taken advantage of earlier on. I think I spent a lot of time kind of focusing on my story and getting the technicals and behaviorals down. And I think that's one thing looking back is to really strike that balance, because it's all important. And you can have your technicals nailed down, your behaviorals nailed down, but if you only know those when you're rehearsing them, to a wall or a mirror, it's not the same as sitting down in front of a camera with someone asking you who knows what they're talking about. And kind of, you have to get used to that pressure and intimidation, because that can't really be emulated outside of the mock interviews. And so as I was approaching my final round, really took advantage of and realized the value in those mock interviews, and glad I had done so when I did, because it wasn't too late, fortunately.
Yeah.
But definitely would recommend striking a balance between kind of really getting in those mock interviews, because it's super important.
Yeah, I think people oftentimes are most scared about the technicals, but then they
Hmm.
don't realize like the skill of learning the technicals isn't just learning the concepts on paper, and even studying your
Hmm.
behaviorals isn't about writing a great script. It's actually about delivering it with authenticity and delivering it with good pacing and all these things. Like the verbal delivery is almost as important as what's being said. And so
Yes.
I think that isn't learned. And that's why we're always like telling our students, like, please just do your first mock. We don't care if you bomb it, but please just do your first one. Because then usually when they do the first one, they realize, oh, wait, that was a lot harder than I thought I knew all of my
Yeah.
answers. And actually delivering it with somebody staring back at you is a lot harder and more nerve-wracking. So
Yes.
yeah, same thing with the higher view simulation. It's like, people think they can do it because they know their answers, but then when they're staring into a blank camera, it's another thing entirely.
Yes.
So tell us about like that final kind of triumphant moment. So you had the super day at Houlihan, and then what happened? They call you right away? Did you have to wait a couple days? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. They called me, I would say probably an hour, within the hour after. And so got the call and was super, I mean, it had been, obviously since August until that moment. And so a lot of stress and work, kind of juggling school and everything. So it was really relieved to kind of have that accomplished, and was really excited about having the opportunity at Houlihan. I really wanted to be there. And so was just super excited about that.
Yeah, it's an amazing outcome. It's a great firm. So congratulations. It's very inspiring, your story. So appreciate you sharing it.
Thank you.
And then
Yeah, of
and
course.
before we call it, any other kind of like final words of wisdom just for students that are maybe in a similar school, similar situation to you, where they're kind of maybe interested in business, but maybe aren't sure what to do,
Yeah.
anything in that sense.
Yeah, so I know we touched on mock interviews and networking. I can't stress the importance of that enough. But I think one thing that you is often overlooked, kind of when you're going through, recruiting and practicing with, your behaviorals and technicals, is really knowing yourself and your story, and you want to communicate, because I you can communicate that with straight genuine interest, and kind of know what it is you're talking about. It goes a long way and really resonates with, the connections you make networking or in interviews. And it also kind of helps you to kind of ease that anxiety and nervousness around the technicals and the behaviorals, kind of just having your stories down and being confident in who you've spoken to, and kind of equipping yourself with all the confidence that makes it a lot easier, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people put all their time or 90% of their time on the technicals when 80% of the interview is behavioral.
Yeah.
It's like, don't just ignore like your story. It can't just be good. It just needs to be really like really polished, exceptional at the exceptional level to compete. And I think people sometimes they'll look at like the standard answers and they'll regurgitate them. I'm like, that's not personal. That's not about you. That's not talking. That's not
Right.
backing your story of like your background. That's like the generic answer. Like, let's work on that. Let's give some details. And so I think that's a really key aspect. And I think it's a good point you made that a lot of students kind of miss that boat. And I think they don't
Mhm.
recognize that a lot of how they're getting judged is like attitude and showing, making it so they demonstrate they understand what the job is and they understand the sacrifice that comes with it and all those other things. So,
Right.
well, Olivia, really appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, thanks so much for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, it was great talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks.